I went to drop off a gift at my daughter-in-law's house. When I saw my husband's clothes scattered around, my heart raced. Then I heard her say, "She's too old to notice." I stayed silent. They were still in bed when the lawyer knocked. I didn't wait to hear them beg. But let me start from the beginning. Because what happened that Tuesday morning changed everything I thought I knew about my family. I had driven across town with a carefully wrapped present for Rebecca. It was her birthday, and despite our sometimes strained relationship, I wanted to make an effort. She was my son, Michael's wife, after all, and the mother of my only grandchild. At 73, I'd learned that family peace was worth more than pride. The gift was a delicate silver bracelet I'd found at an antique shop downtown. Rebecca had admired something similar at Christmas dinner, mentioning how much she loved vintage jewelry. I'd remembered because I always tried to remember the little things about people I cared about.
Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching.
The morning was crisp, with that particular October chill that reminded me why I loved autumn. Harold, my husband of 45 years, had left early for what he called a business meeting. At his age, he still insisted on handling some consulting work, though I often wondered why he bothered. We had enough saved for a comfortable retirement. I parked in Rebecca's driveway, noting that Michael's car wasn't there. He was probably at work already. Michael worked such long hours at the law firm, trying to make partner. Sometimes I worried he was missing too much of little Emma's childhood, but Rebecca always assured me she had everything under control at home. The front door was unlocked, which wasn't unusual. Rebecca often mentioned how safe their neighborhood felt, how she didn't worry about leaving doors open during the day. I knocked softly and called out, "Rebecca, it's Janet. I brought your birthday gift." No answer. I stepped inside, thinking she might be in the shower or busy with Emma. The house felt different somehow, charged with an energy I couldn't quite identify. That's when I saw them. Harold's clothes, his distinctive navy blazer hung over the back of the living room chair. His shoes, the expensive leather ones I'd bought him for his birthday, sat neatly by the couch. His watch, the one his father had given him, lay on the coffee table next to a half-empty wine glass. My mind went completely blank for a moment. I stood there, clutching Rebecca's gift, trying to process what I was seeing. Why would Harold's clothes be here? Why would he be here at all? Then I heard her voice, floating down from upstairs. Rebecca was on the phone, and her words hit me like ice water. "Don't worry about it. She's too old to notice anything anyway. Janet's practically living in her own world these days." I felt my knees go weak. The gift box slipped from my hands, landing silently on the carpeted floor. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart hammering so hard I was sure they could hear it upstairs. "Harold's right about that," Rebecca continued, her voice carrying that casual cruelty that cut deeper than screaming would have. "She's so wrapped up in her little routines and her garden club meetings. As long as we're careful about timing, she'll never figure it out." The stairs creaked. Someone was coming down. I moved quickly, more quickly than I'd moved in years, slipping into the kitchen and pressing myself behind the doorway. My hands were shaking violently, but somehow my mind felt crystal clear for the first time in months. Harold appeared first, wearing only his undershirt and boxer shorts. His hair was messed up in a way I hadn't seen since we were young. He looked relaxed, satisfied, completely at ease in my daughter-in-law's house. Rebecca followed, wearing a silk robe I'd never seen before. She looked radiant in that particular way women look when they're desired, when they feel powerful. She was 35 to my 73, with the kind of effortless beauty that I remembered having once, long ago. They moved around each other with an intimacy that spoke of familiarity, of routine. This wasn't a first-time thing. This had been going on for a while. "Coffee?" Rebecca asked, her voice soft and affectionate in a way she'd never used with me. "Please," Harold replied, settling at her kitchen table like he belonged there. "What time does Michael get home usually?" "Not until 6 at the earliest. He's trying to impress the partners with those long hours." Rebecca laughed, a sound that held no warmth. "Sometimes I think he loves that firm more than his own family." Harold chuckled, and the sound made my stomach turn. "Well, their loss is our gain." I watched my husband of 45 years reach out and touch another woman's hand with a tenderness I couldn't remember him showing me in years. I watched my daughter-in-law lean into that touch like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Janet seemed suspicious yesterday when you got home late," Rebecca said, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. "Did she ask questions?" Harold waved dismissively. "Janet doesn't ask questions anymore. She's gotten so passive about everything. Sometimes I think she's just given up on life entirely." Given up on life? Is that what they thought of me? Is that what I'd become? "Maybe that's for the best," Rebecca said, settling beside him at the table. "Makes this easier for everyone." They talked for another 10 minutes about their plans, about when they could meet next, about how to manage the logistics of their affair. I heard every word, but part of me felt like I was watching it happen to someone else. This couldn't be my life. This couldn't be my husband and my son's wife planning their next rendezvous while dismissing me as a harmless old woman who was too senile to notice. But it was. When they finally went back upstairs, I slipped out through the kitchen door, leaving Rebecca's gift on the counter. I drove home in a daze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. At home, I sat in my favorite chair and stared at the wall for what felt like hours. The house felt different now, tainted by what I knew. Every shared meal, every family gathering, every moment of what I'd thought was happiness had been built on lies. Harold came home at his usual time, whistling as he walked through the door. He kissed my cheek the way he always did, asked about my day the way he always did. I answered normally, amazed at how steady my voice sounded. That night, lying in bed beside him, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront them. I wouldn't scream or cry or beg for explanations. I would do something else entirely. I would be very, very quiet about what came next. But Harold and Rebecca had made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated the woman they thought was too old to notice. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay there next to Harold, listening to his steady breathing, and felt like I was sharing a bed with a complete stranger. Every small sound he made seemed amplified in the darkness. The way he shifted in his sleep, the soft sighs he let out, even the familiar rhythm of his breathing felt foreign now. I kept replaying what I'd witnessed, turning it over in my mind like a stone I couldn't stop examining. The casual way they'd moved around each other, the intimacy in their voices, the cruel dismissal of me as someone too old and foolish to notice what was happening right under my nose. But as the hours passed, other memories began surfacing, things I'd noticed but pushed aside, explained away, or simply chosen not to see. 3 months ago, Harold had started working out again. At 75, he'd suddenly developed an interest in staying fit, spending money on new clothes, even asking me about cologne one day. I'd been pleased, thinking he was finally taking his health seriously. Now I realized he'd been trying to look good for someone else. The late meetings that had become more frequent, Harold would come home smelling like perfume, claiming he'd been in crowded restaurants with clients. I'd believed him because I wanted to believe him, because the alternative was too painful to consider. The way Rebecca had started visiting more often, always with some excuse. She needed my recipe for pot roast. She wanted advice about Emma's school situation. She was concerned about Harold's stress levels and thought I should encourage him to retire completely. I'd been touched by what I thought was her caring nature, her desire to be a good daughter-in-law. How stupid I'd been. I remembered now how she'd started asking subtle questions about our marriage. Was Harold happy? Did we still do things together? Wasn't it hard being married to someone for so long? At the time, I'd thought she was just curious, maybe worried about her own marriage to Michael. Young couples always wondered if love could last decades. Now I understood she'd been gathering intelligence, learning about the weak spots in our relationship so she could exploit them. The physical changes in Harold made sense too. The extra attention to his appearance, the new confidence in his step, the way he'd started spending more time on his phone, always stepping into another room to take certain calls. He'd even started listening to music again, something he hadn't done in years. I'd thought he was having some kind of late-life renaissance. He was, just not the kind I'd imagined. Rebecca's behavior toward me had been shifting too, so gradually I hadn't noticed. The way she'd started speaking to me like I was slightly confused, using that patient tone people reserve for children or the elderly. how she'd begun finishing my sentences or explaining things I already understood. She'd been training everyone, including me, to see me as less capable than I was. I thought about family dinners over the past few months. Harold and Rebecca had started sitting closer together, sharing private jokes, having conversations that seemed to exclude everyone else. I'd attributed it to them developing a good relationship, thinking it was healthy for a family when in-laws got along well. What a fool I'd been. The morning came eventually, gray and cold. Harold got up at his usual time, showering and dressing for another day of his supposed consulting work. I made coffee and breakfast, playing the role of the devoted wife, while my heart felt like it was breaking into smaller and smaller pieces. "I might be late again tonight," Harold said, not quite meeting my eyes as he buttered his toast. "The Henderson project is getting complicated." There was no Henderson project. I was sure of that now. "Of course, dear," I said, amazed at how normal my voice sounded. "I'll keep dinner warm." After he left, I sat at the kitchen table and forced myself to think clearly. I needed to understand the full scope of what was happening before I decided what to do about it. I went to Harold's home office, a small room where he kept his files and computer. I'd never snooped through his things before, had always respected his privacy. That respect seemed foolish now. His desk was neat, organized, much like Harold himself. But when I opened the drawers, I found things that confirmed my worst fears. Credit card statements showing charges at restaurants I'd never been to, at a hotel downtown, at a jewelry store, where he'd apparently bought something expensive just last month. My birthday had been 2 months ago, and he'd given me a gift card to the garden center. I found receipts tucked into a folder marked tax documents. Receipts for flowers, for lingerie, for a weekend at a bed and breakfast in the mountains. Harold had told me he was going to a business conference that weekend. I'd stayed home, thinking he needed the space to focus on work. In his computer's browser history, I found searches for romantic restaurants, for age-appropriate fashion for older men, for advice on how to please a younger woman. The searches went back months, maybe longer. My hands were shaking as I put everything back exactly where I'd found it. I was methodical about it, careful not to leave any trace that I'd been there. Some instinct told me that knowledge was power, but only if they didn't know I had it. The phone rang as I was finishing. It was Rebecca. "Janet, hi. I just wanted to thank you for the lovely gift yesterday. The bracelet is absolutely beautiful." Her voice was cheerful, warm, completely normal, like she hadn't been upstairs in bed with my husband just 24 hours ago. "I'm so glad you liked it," I managed to say. "I was wondering if you'd like to come over for lunch today. Emma's been asking for her grandmother, and I thought we could have a nice visit." The audacity of it took my breath away. She wanted me to come over, probably while Harold was there, so they could continue their charade of being a normal family while carrying on their affair right under my nose. "That sounds lovely," I heard myself say. "What time?" "Around noon? Michael's working late again tonight, so we'll have plenty of time to catch up." After I hung up, I realized what I was doing. I was gathering information, learning their patterns, understanding exactly how they operated. I wasn't ready to confront them yet, but I was preparing for something. I just wasn't sure what. I spent the morning making a list of everything I could remember, every strange behavior, every unexplained absence, every lie I'd been told. The list was longer than I'd expected, going back almost 6 months. 6 months of being played for a fool. 6 months of them laughing behind my back while I played the role of the devoted wife and caring mother-in-law. 6 months of them thinking I was too old, too stupid, too out of touch to notice what was happening in my own family. As I got ready to go to Rebecca's house for lunch, I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw what they saw. A 73-year-old woman with gray hair and laugh lines, someone who moved a little slower than she used to, someone who preferred quiet evenings at home to nights out on the town. But I also saw something they'd missed: intelligence in my eyes, strength in the set of my shoulders, a lifetime of experience that had taught me how to survive difficult things. They thought they knew me, thought they could predict my reactions, control my responses. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I drove to Rebecca's house with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. I was going to lunch with my daughter-in-law, And I was going to be the perfect grandmother, the devoted family member they expected me to be. But I was also going to be something else entirely. I was going to be very, very careful about what I said and did next. The lunch invitation felt like walking into a trap, but I went anyway. I needed to see how they behaved when they thought I was completely oblivious. I needed to understand the full extent of their deception before I decided what to do about it. Rebecca answered the door with Emma on her hip, both of them smiling brightly. My granddaughter reached for me immediately, and for a moment, the pain in my chest eased. Whatever else was happening, Emma was innocent in all of this. "Grandma Janet," Emma squealed, wrapping her little arms around my neck. "Mommy made sandwiches. Did she now?" I said, kissing her soft cheek. "That sounds wonderful." Rebecca led me into the kitchen, chattering about Emma's preschool activities and the beautiful fall weather. She seemed completely relaxed, showing no sign of guilt or nervousness. If I hadn't seen what I'd seen yesterday, I would have thought she was simply being a good daughter-in-law, making an effort to include me in their lives. The kitchen table was set for 3, with Emma's special plate and cup. Rebecca had made chicken salad sandwiches and had even bought the expensive crackers I liked from the gourmet store downtown. It was all very thoughtful, very normal. "I hope you don't mind that it's just us girls today," Rebecca said, settling Emma in her booster seat. "Harold mentioned he might stop by later, but you know how unpredictable his schedule is these days." The casual mention of my husband's name, delivered with such innocent normalcy, made my stomach clench. She was planning to have him here while I was present, probably getting some kind of thrill from the deception. "His consulting work keeps him so busy," I said carefully, watching Rebecca's face. "Oh yes, he's always telling me about the projects he's working on. He's such a dedicated man." Her expression was perfectly sincere, but I caught something else in her eyes. A flicker of satisfaction, maybe even amusement. We ate lunch while Emma chattered about her friends and her favorite cartoons. I found myself studying Rebecca with new eyes, trying to understand how I'd missed the signs of what she really was. She was beautiful. Certainly, at 35, she had the kind of fresh, natural prettiness that photographed well and made other women feel slightly inadequate without quite knowing why. Her dark hair always looked effortlessly styled. Her skin glowed with youth and health, and she had a way of moving that suggested confidence without arrogance. But now I noticed other things. The way she checked her phone frequently, as if expecting important messages, how she kept glancing toward the window, watching for someone. The slight tension in her shoulders that suggested she was performing rather than relaxing. "Janet, can I ask you something?" Rebecca said suddenly, after Emma had run off to play with her toys in the living room. "Of course, dear." Rebecca leaned forward, her expression concerned and caring. "I've been worried about you lately. You seem distant sometimes. At family dinners, you're so quiet. Are you feeling all right?" The question was delivered with such apparent genuine concern that if I hadn't known better, I might have been touched. Instead, I recognized it for what it was: more manipulation, another attempt to paint me as confused and unreliable. "I'm feeling fine," I said. "Perhaps I've just been a bit tired lately. That's what I was afraid of." Rebecca reached across the table and patted my hand. "You know, there's no shame in admitting when we need help as we get older. Harold's mentioned that you seem to forget things sometimes, lose track of conversations." Harold had said that? My husband had been discussing my supposed mental decline with the woman he was sleeping with. Has he? I kept my voice level, interested rather than defensive. "He's just concerned about you. We all are. Michael thinks maybe it would be good for you to see a doctor, just to make sure everything's okay." Rebecca's voice was gentle, sympathetic. "There are wonderful treatments available now for memory issues." I felt a cold rage building in my chest, but I kept my expression neutral. They weren't just having an affair behind my back. They were actively working to make everyone believe I was losing my mental faculties. If I ever tried to expose them, who would believe a confused old woman over a devoted husband and caring daughter-in-law? "That's very thoughtful of everyone to be concerned," I said, "though I haven't noticed any problems myself." "That's often how it starts," Rebecca said sadly. "People don't realize they're having issues, But Harold's noticed you repeating stories, forgetting where you put things, getting confused about dates and appointments. None of that was true. My memory was as sharp as it had ever been, but I could see how effectively they'd been laying the groundwork to discredit me if needed. Perhaps I should make an appointment with Dr. Martinez, I said, playing along. Rebecca's face lit up. That's wonderful. I could drive you if you'd like. Sometimes it helps to have someone there to ask the right questions. The right questions. Questions that would support their narrative of my declining mental state. Emma came running back into the kitchen just then, saving me from having to respond. She climbed onto my lap and started telling me about the castle she'd built with her blocks. I listened and responded appropriately, but part of my mind was processing what I'd just learned. This wasn't just about an affair. This was a systematic campaign to undermine my credibility and position in the family. If they could convince everyone I was developing dementia or some other cognitive issue, they could control the narrative completely. The front door opened and I heard Harold's voice calling out, "Hello? Anyone home?" "In here," Rebecca called back, her voice bright with genuine pleasure. Harold appeared in the kitchen doorway, and I watched his face carefully as he took in the scene. Me sitting at the table with Emma on my lap, Rebecca cleaning up the lunch dishes. His expression went through several changes. Surprise, then a quick flash of something that might have been panic, then a calculated pleasantness. "Janet, I didn't expect to see you here." He came over and kissed my cheek, the same perfunctory gesture he'd made at home that morning. "Rebecca invited me for lunch," I said. "It's been lovely spending time with Emma." "That's nice." Harold looked at Rebecca, and I caught the quick, meaningful glance they exchanged. "I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by to see if Michael needed anything for that project he mentioned." Michael wasn't home, of course. Wouldn't be home for hours. But Harold needed an excuse for being here. "Oh, he's not here," Rebecca said, as if this was news to her. "He's been working such long hours lately. Well, maybe I'll wait a bit, see if he comes home early." Harold settled into the chair across from me, making himself comfortable. I watched them try to act normal, try to behave like a father-in-law and daughter-in-law having an innocent family visit, but I could see the tension underneath. The careful way they avoided looking at each other too much, the studied casualness of their conversation. Emma, bless her heart, broke some of the awkwardness by demanding Harold's attention. She wanted to show him her block castle, and he dutifully admired her construction while she explained all its features. For a few minutes, he was just her grandfather, genuinely delighted by her enthusiasm. I found myself wondering if any of this was real. Did Harold truly love Emma, or was she just another prop in his deception? Did Rebecca care about being a good mother, or was motherhood just another role she played? "I should probably head home," I said eventually, lifting Emma off my lap. "Thank you for lunch, Rebecca. It was delicious." "Oh, you don't have to rush off," Rebecca said, but I caught the relief in her voice. "I do have some errands to run," I said. "Harold, will you be home for dinner?" Another quick glance between them. "Actually, I might stay and visit with Michael when he gets home. Don't wait up for me." Of course he wouldn't be coming home. He'd stay here with Rebecca, probably until quite late. Michael would work until 8 or 9, giving them hours together. I kissed Emma goodbye and let Rebecca walk me to the door. As I was leaving, she touched my arm gently. "Janet, please think about what we discussed, about seeing Dr. Martinez. I really think it would be good for you." I looked into her eyes, these clear blue eyes that had fooled me for so long, and smiled. "I'll definitely consider it, dear. Thank you for caring so much." As I drove home, I thought about what I'd learned. The affair was bad enough, but this systematic campaign to make everyone believe I was losing my mind was worse. They weren't just betraying me. They were trying to erase me, to make me disappear even while I was still alive. They thought they were being so clever, so careful. They thought they had thought of everything. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated me completely. I spent the evening at my kitchen table with a notebook, writing down everything I could remember from the past few months. Every conversation, every strange occurrence, every lie I'd been told. I wrote down names and dates and times. I wrote down what I'd observed and what I suspected. When Harold came home near midnight, smelling like Rebecca's perfume and looking thoroughly satisfied, I was already in bed with the lights out. He slipped in quietly, thinking I was asleep. But I was wide awake, planning what came next. I waited 3 days before making my first move. 3 days of watching Harold lie to my face, of pretending everything was normal while my world had been turned upside down. 3 days of careful planning. On Friday morning, after Harold left for another of his supposed consulting meetings, I drove downtown to the office of Patricia Hendricks, a lawyer I'd found through the Yellow Pages. I'd chosen her specifically because she was a woman about my age, someone who might understand what I was going through better than a young male attorney. Her office was small but professional, with diplomas on the wall and family photos on her desk. She had gray hair like mine, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and the sort of straightforward manner that put me at ease immediately. "Mrs. Morrison," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk, "what can I help you with today?" I had rehearsed this conversation in my head, but now that I was here, the words felt stuck in my throat. How do you tell a stranger that your husband of 45 years is having an affair with your daughter-in-law? How do you explain that they're trying to make everyone believe you're losing your mind? "I need to talk to someone about my marriage," I finally said. "About protecting myself." Patricia leaned forward slightly, her expression professional but sympathetic. "Are you considering divorce?" "I don't know yet, but I think I need to understand my options." I told her everything. About finding Harold's clothes at Rebecca's house, about overhearing their conversation, about the systematic way they'd been undermining my credibility with the family. I showed her the notebook where I'd been documenting everything, the receipts I'd found in Harold's desk. Patricia listened without interrupting, taking notes occasionally. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Morrison, I have to ask you this directly. Do you have any concerns about your memory or mental state? Have you been feeling confused or forgetful lately?" The question stung, even though I understood why she had to ask it. My mind is as sharp as it's ever been. They're trying to make people think otherwise, but it's not true. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "I believe you. And what you're describing is unfortunately not uncommon. Sometimes people having affairs will try to gaslight their spouses, make them question their own perceptions." Gaslight. I'd heard the term before but never really understood what it meant. Now I did. "What are my options?" I asked. Patricia pulled out a legal pad and began writing. "First, we need to document everything thoroughly. I can recommend a private investigator who specializes in infidelity cases. We'll want photographs, detailed records of their meetings, evidence that will hold up in court if needed." Court? "If you decide to file for divorce, having solid evidence of the affair will be important, especially in terms of property division and spousal support. Maryland recognizes adultery as grounds for divorce, and it can affect the financial settlement." I thought about our house, our savings, the life we'd built together over 45 years. Half of everything we owned could be mine by right, but I wanted more than that. I wanted justice. "There's something else," Patricia continued. "If they're really trying to have you declared mentally incompetent, we need to get ahead of that. I'd recommend having a complete psychological evaluation done by a doctor of your choosing, someone who can document your mental acuity. If they try to challenge your competency later, we'll have proof that you were fully aware and capable when this all started." The idea that I might need to prove my own sanity felt surreal, but I understood the necessity. How long would all of this take? Gathering evidence? A few weeks to a month, depending on how careful they're being. The investigator I work with is very good at staying undetected. I left Patricia's office with a business card for David Chen, a private investigator, and an appointment for a psychological evaluation the following week. I also left with something else, a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. David Chen's office was above a Chinese restaurant in a part of town I rarely visited. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 50, with kind eyes and a gentle manner that reminded me of my family doctor. "Mrs. Morrison," he said, offering me tea from a small electric kettle in the corner of his office. "Patricia told me a bit about your situation. I want you to know that these cases are always difficult, but you're doing the right thing by seeking the truth." He explained how the surveillance would work. He'd follow Harold and Rebecca, document their meetings, take photographs that would serve as evidence. He'd be discreet, careful not to let them know they were being watched. "How much will this cost?" I asked, thinking about our joint savings account. "My retainer is $1,500, and then it's $200 a day plus expenses. Most cases like this take about 2 weeks to get sufficient evidence." I wrote the check from my personal account, money I'd saved from my household allowance over the years. Harold had always been generous with money for groceries and household expenses, never questioning what I spent. He probably assumed I wasted it on unnecessary things. He was about to learn how wrong he was about that, too. The psychological evaluation took place the following Tuesday. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a psychiatrist Patricia had recommended, put me through a series of tests and interviews designed to assess my mental state. Memory tests, cognitive assessments, questions about my mood and behavior. "Mrs. Morrison," she said when we were finished, "I want to be very clear about something. You show no signs whatsoever of cognitive decline or mental health issues. Your memory is excellent, your reasoning skills are sharp, and you're clearly fully aware of your circumstances. If anyone tries to suggest otherwise, they're either mistaken or deliberately misleading." She agreed to write a detailed report documenting her findings, something I could use if Harold and Rebecca tried to have me declared incompetent. Meanwhile, I continued my own quiet investigation at home. I started paying closer attention to Harold's habits, his schedule, the lies he told me. I noticed that he showered immediately when he came home from his meetings, that he'd started keeping his phone face down on surfaces, that he'd become jumpy when it rang while I was nearby. I also began testing my own family's perceptions of me. At our weekly dinner with Michael and Rebecca, I made subtle mistakes on purpose, just to see how they'd react. I forgot Rebecca's middle name, confused the date of Emma's birthday by 1 day, asked Michael to repeat something he'd just said. Every time, Rebecca jumped in with exaggerated concern. "Oh, Janet, you asked that same question just a minute ago," she'd say with patient kindness. Or, "Don't worry, we all forget things sometimes." Michael would look at me with growing worry, exchanging glances with his wife that confirmed their shared concern about my declining mental state. Even little Emma started treating me differently, speaking louder and slower, as if I couldn't understand her properly. It was heartbreaking to watch my own family begin to see me as a confused old woman, but it also confirmed what I'd suspected. Rebecca had been working on this for months, planting seeds of doubt about my competence that were now growing into full-blown concern. 2 weeks into David Chen's surveillance, he called with an update. "Mrs. Morrison, I have some information for you. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" I drove downtown with my heart pounding, not sure what I was about to learn, but knowing it would change everything. David had photographs, dozens of them, showing Harold and Rebecca together at restaurants, walking hand in hand through downtown parks, entering and leaving hotels. There were pictures of them kissing, embracing, looking at each other with obvious intimacy and affection. "They're not being particularly careful," David said, spreading the photos across his desk. "They seem to think no one is paying attention." There was more. Credit card records showing that Harold had been paying for hotel rooms, expensive dinners, jewelry purchases. Phone records revealing hundreds of calls and text messages between them over the past 6 months. "There's something else," David said, his expression growing more serious. "I followed them to a doctor's appointment yesterday. Looked like an obstetrician's office. My blood went cold. You think she's pregnant? I can't be certain, but that would be my guess based on the type of practice it was." I stared at the photographs, at the evidence of my husband's betrayal spread across David's desk. Harold looked happy in these pictures, younger somehow, more alive than I'd seen him in years. Rebecca glowed with the kind of radiant beauty that suggested she was deeply in love. They weren't just having a casual affair, they were building a life together, planning a future that didn't include me. "What happens now?" I asked. David gathered the photographs into a neat stack. "That's up to you, Mrs. Morrison. But you have everything you need to take action if you choose to." I drove home in a daze, the envelope of evidence on the passenger seat beside me. Harold was there when I arrived, reading the newspaper in his favorite chair, looking completely relaxed and innocent. "How was your day, dear?" he asked without looking up. "Fine. I said. Just fine. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with all the evidence spread before me: photographs, financial records, phone bills, medical reports documenting my mental competence. Everything I needed to destroy the life Harold and Rebecca thought they were building. But I wasn't ready to use it yet. I had one more thing I needed to do first. I needed to find out if Rebecca was really pregnant, and if so, whose baby she was carrying. The pregnancy question consumed my thoughts for days. If Rebecca was carrying Harold's child at her age, it would complicate everything. My 75-year-old husband potentially becoming a father again, while I, his wife of 45 years, was being painted as a senile old woman who needed to be managed and controlled. I decided to find out for myself. On Thursday morning, I called Rebecca with a story I'd carefully prepared. "Hello, dear," I said, making my voice sound slightly confused. "I was wondering if you could help me with something. I've been having some trouble keeping track of my appointments lately, and I thought I remembered you mentioning a doctor's visit recently. Was that Dr. Martinez? I'm getting so mixed up about which doctors we're all seeing." There was a pause on the other end. "Oh, Janet, you must be thinking of someone else. I haven't seen Dr. Martinez recently. Are you sure?" I could have sworn. I let my voice trail off, playing the part of the confused elderly woman they wanted me to be. "No, I haven't been to see Dr. Martinez. Actually, I've been going to a new doctor downtown for some routine checkups. Dr. Williams. Nothing important, just staying on top of my health, you know? Dr. Williams." I wrote the name down immediately after hanging up. It took 3 phone calls to find the right Dr. Williams. The third one confirmed my suspicions. Dr. Sarah Williams, Obstetrics and Gynecology. I made an appointment for the following day, claiming to be Rebecca's concerned mother-in-law, who wanted to discuss some family health history that might be relevant to her care. The receptionist was hesitant at first, but when I mentioned that Rebecca had specifically asked me to come in, she agreed to schedule a brief consultation. Dr. Williams was a pleasant woman in her 40s who seemed genuinely concerned about providing the best care for her patients. When I sat down in her office, I decided to take a direct approach. "Doctor, I need to ask you something confidentially. Is my daughter-in-law, Rebecca Morrison, pregnant?" Dr. Williams looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, but I can't discuss any patient's medical information without their explicit consent. Privacy laws are very strict about these matters." I nodded, having expected this response. "I understand. But I'm not asking as someone who's just curious. I'm asking because there are some very serious family circumstances that could affect the baby's well-being, and I need to know what we're dealing with." I could see her wavering, torn between protecting patient privacy and what seemed like genuine concern for a family member. "Without confirming or denying anything," she said carefully, "could you tell me what these circumstances are?" So I told her, not everything, but enough. I explained that there were concerns about the paternity of a potential pregnancy, that there was a situation involving an older man who might be the father, and that the family needed to understand the medical implications. Dr. Williams was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. "Mrs. Morrison, I can't give you specific information about any patient, but I can tell you that if you have concerns about a family member's pregnancy, especially involving questions of paternity or potentially complicated family dynamics, the best thing you can do is encourage everyone involved to be honest with each other. Secrets in these situations tend to cause more harm than truth." She paused, then added, "I will say that any pregnancy involving an older potential father does carry certain medical considerations that need to be addressed properly." It wasn't a direct confirmation, but it was enough. Rebecca was pregnant, and Dr. Williams was diplomatically telling me that Harold's age could be a factor in the pregnancy. I left the office with my worst fears confirmed. My husband was having an affair with my daughter-in-law. They were expecting a child together, and they had been systematically working to convince everyone I was losing my mind so they could control the narrative when their secret came out. The drive home felt surreal. At 73, I was about to become a grandmother again, but under circumstances so twisted I could barely process them. The baby Rebecca was carrying would be my grandchild biologically, but also my husband's child. Emma would have a half-sibling who was also her grandfather's child. The implications for Michael were staggering. His wife was pregnant with his father's baby. His daughter would have a half-sibling who was also her step-grandmother's child and her grandfather's child. The family tree had become so tangled it was almost impossible to follow. That evening, Harold came home earlier than usual, whistling as he walked through the door. He seemed lighter somehow, happier than I'd seen him in months. "You're in a good mood," I observed, watching his face carefully. "Just a good day at work," he said, but I caught the flush in his cheeks, the slightly guilty pleasure in his expression. "Rebecca called, by the way. She's invited us over for dinner on Saturday. The whole family." A family dinner. How appropriate. "That sounds nice," I said. "It'll be good to spend time with everyone." What I didn't tell Harold was that I'd already made plans for Saturday. David Chen had arranged for one final surveillance session, and Patricia Hendricks would be standing by with divorce papers already prepared. I'd also made one other call, to someone I never thought I'd need to contact, Dr. Martinez, Michael's family physician. I'd asked him to meet me on Saturday afternoon before the dinner to discuss some concerns I had about the family's health and well-being. I hadn't been specific, but I'd stressed that it was urgent and involved potential harm to his patients. Friday night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Emma, about how this revelation would affect her innocent world. I thought about Michael, who had no idea his marriage was about to explode. I thought about the baby Rebecca was carrying, who would be born into the most complicated family situation imaginable. But mostly, I thought about Harold, the man I'd loved and trusted for 45 years, who had thrown away our entire life together for a woman young enough to be his daughter. Saturday arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood perfectly. Harold left early, claiming he had some errands to run before dinner. I knew he was really going to spend time with Rebecca, probably helping her prepare for what they imagined would be just another family gathering where they could continue their deception. At 2:00, I met Dr. Martinez at a coffee shop downtown. He was clearly puzzled by my request but willing to listen. "Janet, what's this about? You sounded very concerned on the phone." I told him everything. About the affair, about the pregnancy, about their campaign to convince everyone I was mentally declining. I showed him the evidence David had collected, the psychological evaluation proving my competence, the medical records I'd pieced together. Dr. Martinez's expression grew more serious with each detail. "This is extremely concerning," he said finally. "Not just the personal betrayal, but the potential medical complications. A pregnancy at Rebecca's age with a 75-year-old father carries significant risks that need to be monitored carefully." "There's something else," I said. "I believe they're planning to announce the pregnancy tonight at dinner, and I think they're going to claim the baby is Michael's, even though the timing doesn't work if you know when the affair actually started." Dr. Martinez was quiet for a long moment. "Janet, what are you asking me to do?" "I'm asking you to be there tonight, as Michael's doctor, as someone who knows this family's medical history. I think Michael is going to need medical support when he learns the truth about his marriage." He agreed, understanding the seriousness of the situation. At 6:00, I arrived at Rebecca's house carrying a bottle of wine and the envelope containing all the evidence David had collected. Harold was already there, looking comfortable and relaxed in his lover's home. Michael had just arrived from work, still in his suit, looking tired, but pleased to be spending time with family. Emma ran to greet me, and I hugged her tightly, knowing this might be the last normal moment we'd have for a while. "Isn't this nice?" Rebecca said, her face glowing with what I now recognized as the radiance of early pregnancy. All of us together. We sat down to dinner, and the conversation flowed normally for the first course. Harold told a story about his consulting work that I knew was completely fabricated. Michael talked about a case he was working on. Rebecca asked about my garden club meetings, her voice filled with the patronizing concern I'd learned to recognize. Then, as we were finishing the main course, Rebecca stood up and tapped her wine glass with a fork. "Everyone, Michael and I have some wonderful news to share," she said, her voice bright with excitement. Michael looked surprised but pleased, clearly not knowing what announcement was coming. "We're going to have another baby," Rebecca said, placing her hand on her still flat stomach. "Emma's going to be a big sister." The room erupted in congratulations. Michael jumped up to hug his wife, his face radiant with joy. Harold offered enthusiastic congratulations, his performance as the surprised and delighted father-in-law absolutely convincing. Only I remained seated, watching this tableau of deception play out. "That's wonderful news," I said quietly. "When are you due, Rebecca?" "Late spring," she replied, still beaming. "We just found out for certain this week." The timing was perfect for their lie. Late spring would suggest conception in late summer, when Michael and Rebecca had taken a weekend trip together. But I knew better. I reached for the envelope I'd placed beside my chair. "Rebecca," I said. My voice cutting through the celebration. "I think we need to talk." The room went completely still. Rebecca's smile faltered, and Harold's face went pale. Michael looked confused, still holding his wine glass, not understanding why the celebratory mood had suddenly shifted. "What do you mean, Mom?" Michael asked, looking between Rebecca and me. I opened the envelope and pulled out the first photograph. It showed Harold and Rebecca kissing outside a downtown restaurant, their faces clearly visible, their body language unmistakably intimate. "I mean," I said quietly, "that the baby Rebecca is carrying isn't yours, Michael. It's your father's." The silence that followed was deafening. Michael stared at the photograph, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror. Rebecca had gone white as paper, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. Harold stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Janet, what are you doing?" "I'm telling the truth," I said, pulling out more photographs. "Something you haven't done in months." Michael's wine glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. What is this?" I handed him the stack of photographs. Pictures of Harold and Rebecca together at hotels, restaurants, walking hand in hand through parks. Dozens of them, spanning weeks, showing a relationship that was clearly intimate and ongoing. "Your wife has been having an affair with your father for at least 6 months, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos erupting around me. "The baby she's carrying is his child." "Not yours!" Michael looked at the photographs with shaking hands, his face growing more devastated with each image. "Rebecca," he whispered, "tell me this isn't true." Rebecca was crying now, but she wasn't denying it. She stood there, tears streaming down her face, unable to speak. "How long have you known?" Harold demanded, his voice harsh with anger and panic. "I saw your clothes here 3 weeks ago," I said. "I heard Rebecca tell someone on the phone that I was too old to notice what was happening, but you were wrong about that." Michael suddenly stood up, his movement so violent that his chair toppled backward. "You're having an affair with my mother?" he shouted at Harold. "My wife is pregnant with my father's baby?" The raw pain in his voice broke something inside me. This was my son, the little boy I'd raised and loved, and I was watching his world crumble. "Michael," Rebecca said, finally finding her voice, "please let me explain." "Explain what?" Michael's voice cracked. "Explain how you've been sleeping with my father? Explain how you've been lying to my face every day? Explain how you let me believe I was going to be a father again when the baby is actually my half-sibling?" Harold moved toward Michael with his hands outstretched. "Son, this isn't how we wanted you to find out." "We?" Michael laughed, a sound filled with bitter disbelief. "You planned this? You planned to destroy our family?" "It wasn't supposed to happen," Rebecca said desperately. It started innocently, and then we couldn't stop." I pulled out more documents from the envelope, financial records showing Harold's spending on Rebecca, hotel receipts, phone records. "It was hardly innocent," I said. "This has been going on for months, and it wasn't just the affair." I looked directly at Rebecca. "You've been trying to convince everyone that I'm losing my mind, haven't you? Planting seeds about my memory, my confusion, my inability to take care of myself." Rebecca's face flushed red. "That's not... I was concerned about you." "You were concerned about me discovering your secret," I corrected. "So you tried to make everyone believe I was incompetent, that nothing I said could be trusted." I pulled out Dr. Martinez's psychological evaluation. Fortunately, I had myself tested by a qualified psychiatrist. She found me to be completely mentally competent, with no signs of cognitive decline whatsoever. Michael was staring at Rebecca with a look of complete betrayal. "You tried to make us think Mom was losing her mind. While you were sleeping with my father?" At that moment, the doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Dr. Martinez's car in the driveway. "That will be Dr. Martinez," I said. "I asked him to come because I thought you might need medical support when you learned the truth about your marriage." Harold's face went from pale to flushed with anger. "You planned all of this. You orchestrated this entire confrontation." "I documented the truth," I said. "You and Rebecca orchestrated the lies." Dr. Martinez entered, took one look at the chaos in the room, and immediately went to Michael's side. "Michael, are you all right?" Michael looked at his family doctor with hollow eyes. "Did you know about this?" "Your mother told me today," Dr. Martinez said gently. "She was concerned about how this revelation would affect you." "The baby," Michael said suddenly, looking at Rebecca. "How far along are you, really?" Rebecca couldn't meet his eyes. 12 weeks. 12 weeks. Michael did the math quickly. That was when Dad was supposedly at that business conference in Baltimore. When you said you had the flu and couldn't leave the house for 3 days. The pieces were falling into place for him, all the lies and deceptions becoming clear. Emma, who had been playing quietly in the living room, appeared in the doorway, frightened by the raised voices. "Mommy, why is everyone yelling?" The sight of my granddaughter broke the spell of anger that had consumed the room. Rebecca immediately went to her, picking her up and holding her close. "It's okay, sweetheart," Rebecca whispered, though tears were still streaming down her face. Michael looked at his daughter, then at his wife holding her, then at the photographs scattered across the table. "I want you out," he said quietly. "Both of you. I want you out of my house." "Michael," Harold started. "Get out!" Michael shouted, his control finally snapping completely. "Get out of my house! Get away from my daughter! Get away from my family!" Harold looked around the room desperately, as if searching for some way to salvage the situation. His eyes met mine, and I saw something there I'd never seen before. Fear. "Janet," he said, his voice pleading, "we can work this out. We can fix this." "No," I said quietly. "We can't. It's too late for that." I pulled out the final document from my envelope. Divorce papers, already prepared and ready for his signature. "Patricia Hendricks is my attorney," I said. "These papers give you the choice of an uncontested divorce where you get nothing, or a contested divorce where I expose everything publicly and still get everything. Your choice." Harold stared at the papers, his face gray with shock. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." Rebecca was still holding Emma, both of them crying now. "Michael, please, we can talk about this. We can figure out what's best for Emma." "What's best for Emma?" Michael said, his voice cold. "Is for her to be away from people who lie and manipulate and destroy families." Dr. Martinez stepped forward. "Michael, I think we should talk privately about how to handle this situation, especially regarding Emma's well-being." Michael nodded, looking grateful for the professional support. He turned to Harold and Rebecca. "I want you both gone when I come back downstairs. Take nothing that isn't absolutely yours." As Michael and Dr. Martinez went upstairs, presumably to check on Emma and discuss the situation privately, I was left alone with Harold and Rebecca. The silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of 45 years of marriage now ending in betrayal and lies. "I never meant for it to happen this way," Harold said finally. "How did you mean for it to happen?" I asked. "Did you think I would just quietly disappear? Did you think I would let you steal my family and my dignity without a fight?" Rebecca set Emma down and sent her to play in another room. Then she turned to me, her face streaked with tears but her voice steady. "I know you'll never forgive me," she said, "but I need you to know that I never intended to hurt you. I never planned for this to happen." "But it did happen," I said, "and when it did, instead of being honest, you chose to try to destroy my credibility, to make everyone think I was a confused old woman who couldn't be trusted." Rebecca's shoulders sagged. I was scared. I knew if the truth came out, I'd lose everything. "You were right about that," I said. 20 minutes later, Harold and Rebecca were gone. They left together, carrying hastily packed suitcases, Harold's face a mask of defeat, and Rebecca clutching a small bag of Emma's things for what would probably be their last visit for a while. I stayed to help Michael clean up the shattered wine glass and the scattered photographs. We worked in silence, both of us processing what had just happened. "Mom," Michael said finally, "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I didn't see what they were doing to you. I'm sorry I let them make me think you were—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "You weren't supposed to see it," I said. "They were very good at what they did." "How long have you known?" 3 weeks. I spent that time gathering evidence, making sure I had everything I needed to protect both of us. Michael looked at me with new respect. "You planned all of this." "I planned to tell the truth. They planned everything else." 6 months later, I was sitting in my garden, which I'd expanded significantly since the divorce was finalized. Harold had indeed chosen the uncontested option, leaving me with the house, most of our savings, and my dignity intact. Michael had filed for divorce from Rebecca as well. She'd moved back to her parents' house in another state, taking Emma for court-ordered visits every other weekend. The baby had been born healthy, despite the complications of having a 75-year-old father. Harold had tried to contact me several times, but I'd blocked his calls. I'd heard through Michael that he was struggling, that the reality of starting over at 75 with a newborn was much harder than he'd anticipated when he was caught up in the excitement of the affair. I felt no satisfaction in his struggles, but I felt no sympathy either. Michael came over for dinner every Sunday now, sometimes bringing Emma when she was visiting. We were rebuilding our relationship slowly, both of us learning to trust again. "Mom," he said one evening as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, "I want you to know how proud I am of you. What you did took incredible strength. I thought about that, about the woman I'd been 3 weeks ago, accepting lies and manipulation because I thought keeping peace was more important than demanding truth. I'm proud of me too," I said, and for the first time in months, I truly was.